All right, and here we are for our second week of Inner Sanctum.
Yes, where we talk about our cult practices, what we're reading and thinking about and doing in the world of magic.
Yeah, for those of you joining us for the first time by some quirk of the algorithm, my name is Dan Eckhart,
And I'm Kat Eckhart.
and we're celebrity occultists. Inner Sanctum is just a place where we get to talk about the things that are on our mind, maybe answer some questions we see posed around the internet zeitgeist or that people email to us, and more or less just kind of dig into the things that interest us most in magic when we're not teaching at School of Occult Arts or planning expensive retreats or doing whatever it is we do.
They all feed into each other.
They do.
Like, for example, I bought a book, Greening the Paranormal, which we talked about in the last Inner Sanctum.
Mm-hmm.
And I've read a couple of essays this past week that have been really applicable for numinous. And yeah. I've jotted down a lot of ideas that I think, going to add a lot to this retreat this year. We've already held numinous. Mm-hmm. And it was incredible last year.
It was. I'm really looking forward to this year's.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we've got an extra day, which is awesome. And we are, between us and Isabel Rizzo, we've called it the spa day.
Yeah.
Because it's going to be a day of like relaxing and massage and Reiki
and energetic healing, and it like integration of some of the ritual work we do at Numinous. So
yes, but all these things like feed into each other, like because our interest is very
yeah.
I mean, yeah, we love magic. We study it, we practice it, we've made it our career, and then we read about it on our downtime. So what are you gonna do?
Yeah. And I guess we should jump into maybe two of the things that we're doing like this week that both of us have been playing around with.
Yeah.
You mentioned one of them, I think, on the last Inner Sanctum in passing.
I did.
And that is dreaming.
Yes. So been having some interesting dream experiences in the past month, maybe more, maybe 2 months. And I've had a lot of like mini precognitive dreams where I will see something that in my dream that I see something in real life the very next morning or the very next day.
Right.
And one example was that I dreamt that I bought a mood ring without knowing that I was like going to go out the next day or anything like that. And the next day I ended up going with Dan to a local metaphysical shop. And we were like, oh, well, you know, what are we going to get? We'll probably get a book or something like that. And they had this just kind of in the middle of the store on top of another display. They had these mood rings. And I picked it up, and for some reason it didn't shock me that it was there. But I thought to myself, wow, I guess I'm going to get this because in my dream the night before I bought one. So I bought one and I've really been enjoying it.
Well, I want to actually cut through some of this and get to like the real metaphysics of what you're doing here. Because what you've just described sounds like, oh, she had a dream about a ring and then she went out and bought one. The end. Like, what's the point? And what I've been finding that you've been doing
mood rings anymore.
Well, beyond that, what I've been finding when you're talking about this is this element of bringing a synchronization, an intentional synchronization between the dream world and like what we call reality.
Yeah.
And I want to know why you're doing that.
I have talked with you about like that mission.
Yeah.
Of bringing correspondence between what I dream and reality. It's because I think there's something about creating a symmetry and a feedback loop that can be powerful. And I think that's how some magic, maybe all magic works, is creating a kind of symmetry and a relationality.
Like attracts like, the law of opposites, that sort of
vibration and matching vibrations. And so for me, I've been really taking note of the different things I dream, especially actions or symbols, and I will try to recreate it the next day. Like find okay, where is this coming from? And really kind of bringing the waking life
Mhm.
and into closer relationship with the dreaming life.
Yes. And
And
I
that's
like
been
the way you say
interesting.
that, the dreaming life versus
Mhm.
like dreams and then like the real world.
Yeah.
Because that's been the thing that's been interesting me most about dreams is this idea that we all have that dreams are, from a materialist perspective, like dreams are meaningless. Like, what do we do with them? They're,
Well,
it's just the brain trying to figure out
I
like,
was looking this up. I mean,
okay,
yeah, it's not meaningless. It's exactly what you're
sure. It's
saying.
the brain just
It's
trying
the
to make
brain
sense.
working through anxiety or working through trauma. And then, because I did look into, dreaming and lucid
Yeah.
dreaming and a bunch of different stuff, which we will probably talk about a little bit. There is this idea that, and it's not the idea, it's a reality, that your brain is still receiving inputs from your environment while you're dreaming. So you are still getting feedback from your environment. Like if you need to, environment meaning your body as
Yeah.
well. So if you need to go to the bathroom, you might have a dream where you're looking around for a restroom and can't find one. But interestingly, also, I found that the losing your teeth dream is not necessarily about anxiety.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Um, apparently, the losing your teeth might be a signal that you're actually grinding your teeth in your sleep.
Ah,
And that is true for you,
that
Dan.
is really true for me because I grind my teeth and I used to have a lot of dreams about grinding my teeth, not about grinding my teeth, but about my teeth coming out and my jaw not working right. And that's what it is.
Yeah, and that your like brain was telling you, your subconscious is saying like, hey, I'm doing something in this physical reality with my body that is hurting me.
Wow. That's so interesting.
It's still like a materialist perspective,
Yeah,
which is interesting. But even so, there's so much information that can be internalized and understood in dream world,
exactly.
in the dream reality.
And we can view that as like a time to speak with our subconscious. Jung had a lot to say about dreaming being like the conversation of the subconscious and what we are, our conscious mind was not able to acknowledge or synthesize or deal with. And
Yeah.
I've been interested in that, but it was never enough to like make me want to keep a dream journal. It was like, okay, yes, get to know your subconscious, but like part of magical work is figuring out how to do that anyway, outside the world of dreaming.
Yes, absolutely.
But I kind of have changed my tune on this. I
I'm
almost
glad to
feel
hear
like
it.
dreaming is, not only is it one of the most effective tools, and we've always said that for spirit communication, like
Yeah.
dreams are one of the most effective ways to experience spirit communication, especially for someone who's just starting off, who's
Yeah.
someone who's not like a, professional medium or something like that.
Yeah, and many people receive spirit communications in dreams without even necessarily
Exactly. Yeah,
for it. So it comes naturally
it does.
to
And
most.
so the idea of then like causing synchronization or engineering synchronization between the dreaming world and the waking world.
Yeah.
What has that done for you in terms of like the way you think about reality and then by extension the magic you're doing?
Well, I mean, those are two different questions for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I think the other examples have been small things like seeing shoes
Mm-hmm.
in my dream that I see the next day. And I think I've had other examples, but I need to
Well,
actually
there was
consult.
literally one we had just like 15
my
minutes ago
What?
where you said that we were talking about our altar space and where we work and
Oh,
do
that's right.
magic. Yeah, and Kat was saying
You
to
caught
me
it.
that this wasn't like the best space to be doing it, like that.
We got the table here.
Yeah,
And you have to like move when you're doing the summoning and banishing. And with the table, it's kind of like I must stay pretty constrained.
yeah, exactly. And so she said, well, why don't we go out into the like living room area and have the, do the workings there? And I said, it's funny because I literally had this dream last night that we had removed our entire altar and removed our television and like switched up where in the central focus of the space instead of the TV was now our entire altar for doing ritual workings. So you had an element of like, or I had an element in my dream of precognition, but also something that I think is probably a message from the altar space, from the house, from the spirits we work with, that this needs more, this needs a different placement.
Yeah. So a lot of things communicating. We're saying not just our subconscious or unconscious, but also our bodies, our environments, and the spirits of our environment or spirits.
Well, I don't think like, I think a lot of people make the mistake. Yeah, just like real life. I think a lot of people make the mistake that communication in one area comes from one specific type of entity, being, spirit, etc., or that only one can communicate at a time. So like, I had a dream and the dream was precognitive, or I had a dream and the dream was a spirit message, or I had a dream and it was a synchronistic kind of view into the subconscious and what I'm actually feeling. In magical praxis, all three of those things could be happening at the exact same time and are not necessarily distinct from each other.
Yeah, that's the difficulty. But I think at that point you need to direct your focus to, well, what is the meaning of the message and how does it value? What is the value for me? Because it can become overwhelming to try to parse out.
Oh yeah.
Can be.
And it can be an exercise in ultimately like futility. Like who really cares whether it's the plant spirit telling you this, or a departed loved one telling you this, or it's your subconscious. All of those messaging pieces, I think, and maybe this gets at like an even deeper level of discourse in like what is magic and where does it come from. If we are truly creating our reality and creating like a universe that extends from our will or our imagination, if new thought is correct, then the messages we would be receiving from either the universe speaking back to us or from our own will speaking back to us, kind of like in a like little loop, we would be creating all those things anyway. Like this is, I guess, like, a big brain take and not like, oh, Dan's so intelligent, but this is like a stoner thought. But still, this is like, if it's true that we are the focal point by which all of reality is created, and that's how we experience the world, then I don't necessarily know. And as a medium, I don't really know how much of a difference there needs to be between the subconscious body, like experiencing something to give me a message, versus a spirit causing the same sensation in my body to give me a message.
You've got me thinking about the various philosophies of reality. And I can't remember the name of the one that you're just referenced, but I think that you're describing more nuance than that. Like, because you don't think you're the only being.
Oh, no, this isn't like solipsism or whatever. This is when we're creating out, when we're manifesting, when we're doing magic. Like,
it's an exercise or a framing, or
we can only perceive ourselves as individuals. It's really hard to perceive ourselves as like a greater whole without, meditation or entheogens or something like that. So when you're especially starting out at like a kind of base level and you are experiencing all of reality from this point of like your senses, the difference between spirit message and the way that it comes in almost feels arbitrary for the beginner, because they should really just be focused on getting those messages in whatever way they're coming. And then at a more advanced level, once you're kind of worked your way up the tree a little bit, then we can begin to parse out, because then we know why it matters. Then we know why the message coming from a plant spirit or from a departed loved one or an ancestor or the body, then we know what to do with that information. Where I think a lot of like lower down, and like when we're just starting out and getting into magic, a lot of individuals seem to get caught up in the identifying and placement of where things are coming from, to the detriment of paying attention to the message that's actually coming. Does that make sense?
Yes, and I do agree partially, because I believe we should not put obstacles up in the way of our growth, especially as we're beginning to dive into a subject something as all-encompassing as the occult or magic.
Right.
So don't put more things in your way at the beginning to stop you from just developing in a way that you can explore, in a way that you're interested in.
Mhm.
And I understand that, but I also think that it can be helpful depending on your situation to figure out where messages coming from.
Oh, sure.
Because sometimes the messages are totally different.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're dealing with a haunting.
Mhm.
Sometimes you're dealing with entities in a sacred space, in a sacred place, and that is uniquely tied into the message that they're giving you. Like,
Yeah.
hey, I want a relationship with you, or something needs to be fixed, and then you do need to identify who is speaking.
Yeah.
But I do think you're totally right. Like, don't put additional obstacles in your way.
Right. I think some of those silos are less helpful. And maybe that's just
Yeah, and there's blending.
there is. There is.
It's
Because
complicated.
once you
It's like the
to-
mind body.
it
right?
is.
The mind body, there's blending. It's kind of, it's better in some ways if you're looking at some things and doing some things to see them as separate.
Yeah.
Because here we're talking about dreaming, and like I've studied astral projection, and in theosophy there is kind of this separation, like your consciousness, your astral body separates from your physical body. And there we're using the framing of the mind body divide.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's better to imagine this, but there's blending here in the mind body. There's relationship. But there's also relationship in the spirit world, which is another kind of division that kind of exists, but kind of doesn't.
Yeah. And I think that's the hardest part of like walking this path and having this conversation, which is what is the distinctions that we draw and how arbitrary are they, especially when we kind of move towards no, I mean arbitrary, like how arbitrary are some of the distinctions we draw? I think they are, especially in early beginner magic, pretty arbitrary. And I think what you said points to that like immediately. And that is, yes, what's this world and what's the spirit world? But like, what is really the difference? Because there is a difference, but it's not like a light switch, like on and off. Instead, it's like two pieces of semi-translucent paper, like sitting over top of each other.
The liminal.
Yeah, it's the liminal.
Okay, we need to really ground this again, because we are getting into some really, really complex stuff. And I think you asked me, how does my bringing my waking life into closer relationship with my dreaming life, how does that change my perception of reality?
Yeah.
I will say it's a weird feeling when you realize that what you're seeing, or what you have an opportunity to do, or what's coming through in your life is what you dreamt of a few days ago, or sometimes it's months ago.
Yeah.
Like the other thing is, our town street is under construction.
Yes.
And I dreamt the town was under attack. For some reason, I viewed that as an attack, basically. And now driving by, you can look at it and see the same things, but of course I know that we're not at war in this small place we live. But it's one of those things where when I realize that, it's just amazing. And it does make me think, oh, reality is very movable. It's very fluid, and it's different than, like, linear time might be different, and my actions may be different than I initially understood them to be, as something that is done and complete only after I've done it.
Yeah, I think there's a real sense of,
but there's an imaginal piece there, and there's a correspondence and relationship piece. Yeah.
No, that's excellently put, because I think there is a real it's not so much that like reality is movable, I don't think, as much, because it is movable, but it's like that's like, I get what you're saying. I just think that there's a more cohesive like whole when we don't disregard dreaming as a reality experience. Like when we stop thinking about our life as like half of it being spent asleep and the dreams that come through in that time of not being of any importance, when we like plug that back into the rest of our life, it almost feels for me like there's a missing piece that's kind of reconnected. That yes, it's different and it's strange, but I would argue not any more strange than the world around us, in waking life. Yes, there are things we can do in dreams that we can't do in waking life. However, the messaging and stuff, I think there is a dream logic. There is like an internally consistent thread. And I think people recognize that when they like wake up from a nightmare or from a really positive dream and it affects their next day.
Well, yeah, that's a really good point too. Like there are different types of dreams.
Mm-hmm.
And usually the observer or the dreamer is able to distinguish.
Yeah.
Was this a good dream? Was this just, I don't even know what that was.
Mhm.
Dream? Was
Yeah.
this a nightmare? Was this precognitive? Sometimes you don't know that piece.
Sure.
But sometimes we're able to know if it's a really significant dream.
Yeah.
And I think for me, I've known when it's been very emotional and when I wake up and it's profound. It's like it just punched me in the face.
Yeah.
Like when I dreamt that we should move more into magic
Mm-hmm.
in our career.
Yeah. That was all predicated on Kat's dream.
Yes, it was. I guess I woke up from that dream and I was like, immediately, that was really meaningful. I need to write that down. I felt, I don't really remember what I felt. It was a strong emotion.
Mm-hmm.
I think it might have been sadness,
Mm-hmm.
which is interesting, but it was just a strong emotion that really got my attention. Like, hey, this is important.
Yeah.
So I've been paying attention to my dreams, and sometimes it's successful, sometimes not, because sometimes you have alarms and things like that disrupt you.
Sure. And it's hard to keep a dream journal, I think, as someone who's started many of them and used to experiment a lot with lucid dreaming. I feel like,
You did.
Yeah, in college, in
Yeah.
high school, I did a lot of like lucid dream stuff, which was weird because I was doing it, but not in. There's so many times where I like look
You
back
got
on my
close,
life,
so close
yeah,
to magic.
realize I'm just doing magic without actually recognizing what it is.
Yeah.
But
That happens for a lot of people.
I think it does.
So.
That was definitely one of those kinds of experiences. However, I do think that keeping a dream journal can be very difficult because we actually have to, like, at this point in the timeline, I guess, retrain ourselves not to use like cell phones first thing in the morning, and instead, without moving, because the more you move, the less dream recall you tend to have.
Really?
Yeah. You have to like
I don't know if I knew that.
move very little over to your notebook, and then maybe in the morning light write out all the dreams you had. And I just find that to be a process, and I am not someone who loves a process every single morning. However, I've started doing it again, and it
Good.
does feel more the dream recall is improving.
Good. I think yeah, for me, I don't write them in the morning generally unless they're like really important, like I just mentioned, but I'll like recall and rehearse them first thing, like right when I wake up. What did I dream? How far back, how many dreams can I remember? And I've been able to remember more dreams, which is curious.
Yeah.
But then I'll write down the significant things. Like I saw, this is another example, like I saw a page of beautifully designed oracle cards. And it's one of those things that stuck with me. I don't know why, but I do anticipate seeing it at some point in the future.
Well, we'll keep an eye out.
Yeah.
Do you find yourself, have you thanked yourself, thanked your body, your consciousness for your dreams?
Yes.
Okay. And has that had any impact?
Perhaps. I think the act of like taking time to recall them and taking time to record them later or in the moment, depending on my past, and how I've been with this, I think that can be an act of gratitude also. Not to undermine the actual thinking, the actual feeling of gratitude, but I think that there's a piece of appreciation there
Sure.
too. So I think, yeah, gratitude's a wonderful practice for improving, honestly, your whole life, because it makes you happier,
Yeah.
And more appreciative. But also it does help you if you're developing a skill. And I think remembering your own dreams can be kind of developing a lost skill.
Yeah, I think, well, I know from everything that I've read that people used to place far more emphasis on their dreams than they do now.
I mean, some people
Yeah,
really
some people
do.
still do.
Yeah.
We want to be
Especially
clear
globally.
here. Yeah, globally, dreams are still very important.
But
And
as
there's
raised, it was like, that's an interesting.
no, as we were raised, it was dreams are boring. Please stop talking about your
Don't
wooden teeth.
your stupid dreams.
I don't want to hear your dream. It's
I'm
terrible.
still very self-conscious about sharing
Yeah.
my dreams, and I'm
glad you do. Well, I'm glad you share them with me and
everyone who watches
everyone watches this
particular one.
I mean,
there
is something useful about dreams.
bridged.
I think that I will say one of the reasons I never got into dream interpretation was I did not ever want to hear someone tell me their dreams. But now
done since then.
Yes.
And
it's been very interesting. And I actually really like it. I do think that like dream dictionaries are stupid, and I stand on that. Like
you stand on them?
I stand on them, put them on my feet, walk around the house. Stupid dream dictionaries. We have two of them right there. I'm looking right at them. Dream Dictionary and Dreamer's Dictionary.
What are they doing here?
Well, I have them as references.
Shoes.
Yes, that's where I keep my shoes, on the top shelf of the bookshelf. Yeah, I have them for reference because I think as a reference, they're interesting. I don't think that there's really anything to the internal, like, dictionary of dreaming, because dreams are so specific and they work with a specific language of symbol. I find myself agreeing. Personal? Yes, I find myself agreeing far more with, with Jung on his concepts around dreaming, but also with Spare, where he's talking about developing an understanding of your internal symbols. And I think it's Jung who actually wrote that he didn't think there was much value in finding someone else to interpret your dreams, but rather, and in his case, he's talking like a therapeutic approach, to walk the person who's like having weird dreams through a conversation around what their meaning is to that person. So when someone's on the couch with, Jung historically, they're not like, oh, doc, I keep dreaming about bees. And he's like, well, the bees mean, you're too close to your mother or something. He would ask them, what do the bees mean?
Bees can be a symbol to the underworld, which in Numinous I found, because there were a bunch of bees outside of the cave.
Yeah.
For some reason.
On our way to the cave.
A specific type of flower. Impatience? I'm not sure. Pale jewelweed. Much different. But pale jewelweed surrounding that, and at the entrance of the cave, very magical. Yeah. So symbols, full of meaning and I think value, but we're surrounded by them in the dream world, but also in waking life. And that's the other piece that's really been standing out to me. And we talked about it in Barnes and Noble like 3 months ago.
We did.
maybe less. But we're surrounded by symbols that are both very personal and also cultural. And paying attention to those symbols, meaning more than just shapes or particular animals.
Yeah.
But kind of in an effable attitude. I would say attitude or vibration. People say vibe.
Sure.
But actual symbols as well, like shapes and animals.
And I would record those symbols and what they mean to you with awareness of maybe what they mean to other people. Like,
Yeah.
But crucially, what do they mean to you? Because when they show up in your dreams or when they show up in the synchronistic way in your life, they're not going to show up in accordance to what other people think. So if you like have a really rough relationship with Christianity and Christianity as a symbol set, it has many symbols, it is a religion. If those symbols have negative meaning to you, those symbols are not going to show up in your life synchronistically with sudden positive meanings. They're going to have like negative associations because that's how you associate. So creating like your own dream dictionary or your own like lexicon of symbols then allows you to not only divine with it, like what Spare ultimately would do, which is come up with his own tarot based off of his own symbols that come from dreaming and relationship.
Yeah.
But it also then allows you to make sense of synchronicity. So it's not just like, gee, I'm walking down the street and I see all these hawks all the time. I wish I knew what these hawks were about. That's cool. I know it's important, but it means nothing to me.
Google hawk.
Yeah, what does hawk mean? What does hawk mean to you?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
But yes, but what is it meaning for you? What events does it precipitate in your life? What emotions does it bring up?
Mm-hmm.
What is the spirit of the hawk, the spirit of those particular birds that are appearing to you?
And that doesn't mean like that you just park it at the door and say like, okay, the hawk to me means that, it's going to rain on Tuesday. Maybe it does mean that.
That's so specific.
It's way too specific. Be aware of that.
I mean, if you have a symbol
dictionary
that's lexicon. That is as specific as that. Wow. Can you tell us who you are and email us?
That would be amazing.
That's incredible.
But the other piece of that is like, be aware of like occult correspondences. Like and when we look up correspondences, it's not to just say like, oh, these must be, or that they're all, BS, because there is a sense sometimes where people are getting into magic are just like, I don't care about the correspondences. Not because I'm not there yet, but just because like it doesn't matter and I know what I know. It's sometimes surprising how accurate those correspondences are in building out the more complex meaning of that certain symbol. So being aware of that. And I just, it comes back to what we always talk about in Seance Coven. Record things without judgment and then look back on them and say, well, what could this be about? What correspondences resonate with me? What symbols resonate? What do they mean? What feels like the most full meaning right now for me? That's a different process because we don't want to judge what's coming in first.
Yes, and actually my writing down, like the town is at war,
was
a bad recording of that piece.
Sure.
And thankfully I remembered. Wasn't too far in the past that I remembered what it looked like and where it was exactly. And I was able to say this happened in this way. In reality and happening now. So being more specific and less specific. So more specific, like this is what I saw versus immediately ascribing it to a certain thing.
And that is like the finesse of magic, the idea of like more specific but also less specific. It is when we're doing magic, like there is a certain finesse and flourish that each individual practitioner will have, and that is going to be built on like basic principles but distinct to each person and the way in which they practice. That finesse is something that you can also then play with. And one of the ways like we're playing with finesse is with the other thing we were talking about, which was sigils and sigil launching.
Yeah.
And right now we're doing some sigil workings, which take advantage of planetary times, angelic rulers, astrology. They're actually quite complex sigil workings that require spreadsheets and timers and conversions and all. Very fun. But that's not something you're going to do all the time for sigil magic. And it points out the days where things are most opportune or where your sigil magic might have the most oomph. But it does, if you only use that style of sigil magic, it does limit the amount of days that are favorable for doing sigil magic. So one of the things that we're kind of finessing to play with that is literally to launch sigils on one day every week, the same day. And after you get through like, a year's worth of sigil launches, 52 sigil launches on the same day of the week, you begin to kind of like even out the astrological consequences or the space weather of those influences, and hopefully some of those sigils break through. You can see here that that's a less specific way to do it, but there is still a finesse to be able to be launching sigils even when it's not, quote unquote, the most opportune.
Exactly. Again, removing obstacles where
Yeah.
you can, so that you can do the magic that helps you.
Yeah.
I think that this is a proper example of a magical experiment, and we should perhaps write out our hypothesis
Yeah.
if we want to get more empirical with it, which we don't always.
No.
Which we don't always, but I think sometimes it can be really useful, especially if we're looking at what works.
Yeah,
again.
when we're looking at works-based, and I think that's very true for chaos magic and for sigils specifically.
Which does what, like
Yeah.
for some magic.
Right.
For some magic, what works and like specific outcomes are maybe important, but other times could be a complete detriment.
Yeah, give me an example of that. Because I think I agree with you.
Perfect.
Wow.
Dreaming. Right there. Just right.
Yeah.
Well, you don't want to think too long when you're talking.
Well, that's actually really true.
But if I'm always like, oh, well, I need to have precognitive dreams, and how can I do certain things, make a certain tea or ask for a certain intention before bed so that I can have a specific number of precognitive dreams a week. That could potentially be really damaging to my whole relationship with dreaming, but also in inducing that effect. But also, how do you measure certain things that are kind of immeasurable? Like precognition is difficult to measure.
It is.
Because you don't always know when it has happened in real life, not in lab sessions, lab environments. But I think that sometimes the value of magic is so much beyond what you think works or what you think is working.
Yeah.
The value is hard to see all the time because it's layered.
And it's the magic is literally anti-solutionism. Yes, it's also parallel to our current reality. Like it's parallel to our current way of thinking. And a good example, I think, of this is like that when you do magic, it's free. Like you can do as much magic as you want. And some of that magic might have things that require spending money on to get.
Tell that to our local metaphysical shop.
But the actual
spend much money there.
Oh, sure.
I'm teasing.
No, I mean,
well, it's the truth.
That's true. But when we talk about like magic being free,
the action,
buying books is not magic. Like going and buying a book is not magic. It is, and I think a lot of people buy a lot of magical books. We said this before because they're attempting to buy a solution, and just by having the book, there is a solution by osmosis. The actual putting into practice of magical books is free, especially in chaos magic, especially in folk traditions, because modern folk magic is built to be accessible. Like everything that you get should be from the grocery store if you're doing modern folk magic for certain environments, and it's highly adaptable.
Or your backyard.
Yeah, or your backyard,
or your neighbor.
Right. So the actual act, though, of like doing something like the law of attraction, or doing something like sigil launches, or doing angel communication, all can be free. And it doesn't matter how much of it we do. We're not diminishing those results
by doing
within those practices by doing more. In fact, if it's probabilistic, like Carol says it is, then the more we do, the better. However, I think a lot of people, myself included, feel like it's actually really difficult to get into a space of doing like sigils all the time, because our society, our like American capitalist moment, has taught us that unless there's some kind of like financial expenditure, we're not actually getting anything. So this seems to, in my mind, there are times where it feels like, I should launch all these sigils. And then I think, but I could probably, maybe I should just go buy a candle. Like if I buy the candle, will that be more powerful? Is that more strong than the sigil? And that was something I fell into early on in my magical journey, which was like, I should buy the thing because then it's real. Then something happens.
Is it better than if you bought it from like,
oh yeah,
something else that has worked on it and intended for it?
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the kind of trap you fall into. And so when we're talking about like magical praxis, it's kind of a parallel reality to consensus reality, but the rules are a little bit different. And those different rules are often what is being spent is actually more vital. Like what is being spent is your intention, your energy, your time, attending to like adoration practices, prayers. Those have more, offerings. They have more of a energetic expenditure than just swiping a card through a payment reader. That's an energetic expenditure too, but it's of a different sort.
It's like pulling from something else.
Yeah.
I think all you have to do really good magic is just be pure of mind and body and heart.
So what do you mean then, or not mean, because I think we largely agree that this idea of like asceticism isn't really productive for today. What is a better way then of looking at the conservation and movement of energy and that refinement process within magic if we're not refining ourselves for the purity of heaven's embrace?
I think talking about certain techniques leading up to magical workings and understanding their usefulness apart from this idea of purity, idea of being like a higher elevated being, just kind of because, and getting away from a term that doesn't really provide much value, I think, at least for me.
Yeah, I would agree.
And then figuring out what is the usefulness of these techniques, such as fasting and in many different ways. And you couching it and understanding it in the way of this promotes altered consciousness. I think that is what really would, and it has made me more amenable to doing those things and trying those things.
I would note that since you've started integrating magic and synchronizing your dream world with the waking world, that your magical workings have taken on more structure and have taken on more consistency. And I think that's really interesting because...
You're talking about my ceremonial workings, or...
Well, yes, because you weren't doing...
I wasn't doing...
You weren't doing any real ceremonial workings beforehand. And then literally we had a health journey between right before Christmas Day, actually.
Right before the solstice.
Right, yeah, all the way up through to Christmas Day.
Means we basically did not celebrate it, which was very sad.
It was sad. And regardless, in that period, we ate very little.
Yeah.
And it was very much equivalent to like a kind of fasting journey. Like, because the altered state of consciousness was notable to the point where when we were driving up to visit family on Christmas Day, we were both like, yeah, I totally see why this would be a great time to cast a spell because you're in that, like, it's a very heightened, very focused space.
It's hard to describe because I have heard it described as focused. And it kind of was, but also kind of wasn't. It's kind of the opposite also.
It reminded me of... But
heightened, I think, is a good description. Yeah. What were you going to say?
Well, it reminded me of certain mind-altering substances. Where you're hyper-focused on something, and it feels like you've been focused on it for an eternity, and then you forget that you were focused on it, and something new comes in and distracts you. That's what it reminded me of.
Yeah.
But without the rapid flightiness of those types of substances, where like I think there's a rapid kind of like I can't pay attention to anything. that fasting does not have.
Oh my gosh. And you know what? I have another fasting practice.
Yeah.
Now on Sundays, I do no internet day,
Yeah.
which, my
Very
level
helpful.
of success is varying, varies, but I do try to abstain from the internet and social media in particular. So there are multiple ways of fasting. And I do think, yeah, that probably has helped my magic and my practice.
Yeah, I think that I have a hard time with ceremonial magic's kind of like internal working, where there's some beliefs that the reason to do ceremonial magic is that it condenses multiple reincarnations into one lifetime, or that it helps you strengthen the will and soul to such a point that you aren't obliterated by cosmic consciousness when you do reach, like when you do pass from this plane. I find I find that a little too, like, I think of that too much as like Eastern religion meets Christianity fan fiction. Like, oh, we have to purify our consciousness and will so that like the Zlorks don't eat us when we pass from this realm. It feels too much like the reptile cult that is in Parks and Recreation, that they believe every year is going to come back.
Oh my God.
And no shade to anyone who believes that. Like, we all have beliefs. That's just not an operating belief for me. Like, I get no magical juice out of thinking the reason I'm doing magic is so that I purify my soul so that Zlork doesn't eat me. There's no Zlork that I'm aware of. That's a joke.
That's another, like, doing something so that you can get something else.
To me, that feels
undermines what you're doing, or maybe it doesn't.
To me, it feels so ego driven.
I think it's just
it's so like, I'm afraid that when I pass, I'm not going to be me anymore, and I need to preserve my kernel of consciousness. And I almost feel as if the better, or at least the way I look at it, is we all have to suffer some kind of death and some kind of passing and some kind of transformation. And I don't think I necessarily, if cosmic consciousness will absorb me at some point after this plane, I don't necessarily think that I want to like hold on to Dan and not be absorbed, like.
Yeah, I think that's so strange too, because the ideas of these exercises, especially in ceremonial magic, are around ascending from the ego.
Yeah.
Or, understanding that we're connected, or just altered states of consciousness that aren't simply, myself, my personality, my thoughts cycling all the time.
Yeah. And that's not like,
so that you can preserve that ego ultimately.
Yeah, that seems weird to me. Like, and
maybe I'm misunderstanding.
Maybe I'm misunderstanding. I will put that out there. Like, it's very possible.
Maybe this is mystery also.
Maybe it is. But another component of it is, I do want to stress, there are a lot of, like, the majority of ceremonial magicians in my living experience who I've met and spoken with have vastly different cosmologies, very different worldviews. Just because one person said that on a podcast I was listening to, or an interview, doesn't necessarily mean that is the representation of the whole
ceremonial magic.
Right. I want to be clear, because there are weird beliefs in like every magical form, whether it be traditional witchcraft or chaos magic.
For sure.
Yeah.
And like weird implications, like follow through on that logic, and you're like,
But to me, that's why magic is so useful. It needs
to evolve in this particular way.
That's why magic is so useful to me. Like, that's why why I'm endlessly fascinated with it. Because I think magic, when done well, teaches us to be very specific about certain, I'm just like, very specific about the way we talk about the world. Because we want to know what those implications are, the way we talk about the world. So when we're saying the only reason to do fasting is so that we can achieve purity, well, that is a spell, and that has implication for how we view ourselves, how we view what's possible. The purpose of our magical journey, like, is our purpose to be ascetic vessels, or is our purpose to be, experiential beings? Or is our purpose to desire things?
Food as well.
Yeah.
Like thinking of food as bad, fasting as good. I am good for not allowing myself this. Yeah, I mean, it's good to really um actively try to engage new perspectives about what we believe, what we
Yes.
think in our philosophies. I think there is value in that, as there is value in believing it wholeheartedly while you're doing magical
While you're doing it, right?
practice, for sure.
Like, to me, that is the beauty of really effectively done chaos magic, is the
Mm.
controlled belief. And the controlled
If
belief
you can
in the
manage it.
ritual that I wholeheartedly believe while I do this Necronomicon working, that Yog Sothoth is real and has influence and is powerful.
Why are you doing the Necronomicon? Why? Why?
Well, it's an interesting, like, I think we can, again, to kind of piggyback on the last conversation we had, what things are quote unquote real and what things are historically known. And I don't know anyone outside of Peter Levinda who's trying to make an argument that, Lovecraft is real or influenced by the etheric plane. However, there is something deeply striking about Lovecraftian cosmovision. And I understand there's a
Right.
lot of people who
That is true.
plug themselves into that to really power their magical workings and to create a scheme by which they can view the world. And like, I don't care in magical praxis so much, or magical theory so much. I don't care what people believe when they're doing ritual so much as that they have a coherent cosmovision, because that's really what matters.
Well, I think that helps a lot, but what matters is believing that what you're doing matters.
Yeah. Yeah. And we only do things, we only give things value if they have cosmovision, right? Like, if they have a reason for being.
And cosmovision here, you mean like
a scheme of the way the cosmos works. Like, what are the gods? What are the deities? Why do I believe them? What do they want from me? What is my quest in this life to complete?
So that means you also have to have like a understanding of how you think magic works.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, it just doesn't have enough.
Well, this is the big brain moment, I think. And like, again, this is just a statement of where I stand right now. I don't necessarily, just because I'm saying this doesn't mean I endorse it for the future.
Oh my gosh.
But what I would argue is that if imperialism, like the imperial way of measurement and the machine universe and this kind of very hierarchical way of breaking down the world into systems. Okay. If there was one system
by which we understand reality.
Right. So if ceremonial magic is correct, and there is one system, and that system is Kabbalah, and Kabbalah makes everything go.
Okay.
In my opinion, that's been proven incorrect by the success of chaos magic, because chaos magic, for some practitioners, denies the Kabbalistic system, denies the Rosicrucianism, denies whatever, and says, screw your tree of life. I'm putting in Yog Sothoth, and now it's Lovecraft all the time. Or I'm putting in the Power Rangers. And
oh my gosh.
At what point some of those workings don't work? Some of them do work. Some of them work really well. Some of them might even work better than the Kabbalistic tree of life for that person. So to me, to the operator.
Yeah.
So to me, that means that there is no imperialist system of magic that is objectively true, in that it's a foundational cause of the universe.
Wow.
At that level, I think there are foundational truths within magic and within everything.
What is cause?
Right. But I don't necessarily know if the way we're articulating it, I think we're at a point in magic where we can say the articulation is, it's not just dress up. It's not. It is empowered drama. It is quote unquote ritual.
The use of symbol.
Yes,
metaphor. This
exactly.
Is how you speak to spirit.
It's
this is how the
speaking to the spirit, and the spirit, I would maybe say, is spirit subconscious, or is subconscious spirit.
Are we whole or are we fragmented?
Yeah. And I think I'll have more information on that when we complete Liber Curatorio with School of Occult Arts. And part of that is contacting your holy daemon. Which is that idea of the guiding spiritual force for your life, like the entity that's meant to speak uniquely with you about you. I think we'll have more information as to whether or not the foundational systems are objectively correct, or if it's like what you and I posit, and thinkers greater than us about it's the symbol set and it's the way we're interfacing with the universe, and belief, that's what matters.
I think we can move forward with that as an operating theory.
We'll see.
Yeah, so lots going on this week.
What's going on this week, right?
Sigils, still doing summoning and banishing from the Celtic Golden Dawn by John Michael Greer. And oh my gosh, working through so many different magical experiments with dreaming.
Well, let's quick wrap up. We have a few minutes here. Let's wrap up with some of those like actual magical workings we've done over the past week. Or do you not want to, because they're still in process and we should keep them silent?
Well, what have I done this past week? I'm just looking at my schedule book. Because that will surely have the information I'm looking for.
I'm going to say we actually shouldn't talk about what we're doing because it's in process.
Okay.
But we can tell you probably in our next one.
We're doing sigils.
Well, yes, but we don't tell them what for.
No, we'll never tell you what for.
However, when you see this, so that'll be Friday, the 20th of January. When this is released, check out our Instagram, because there will be a slew of stories that are posted with sigils, and you can look at and fire those sigils if you so choose.
Yeah, it's like mutual aid. Yep. Help us out magically for good things. Perfect. I promise. All right. Well, wonderful conversation. We'll be back next week to talk about any progress, other things we've been thinking about and experimenting with, and maybe more books, because we mentioned one book this week, but I feel like books are gonna
I'm looking
intense.
I'm looking at the bookshelf, and I honestly think that we could very easily do a whole show or a whole conversation on the Book of the Law from Crowley. I would love to talk the Book of the Law and juxtapose that maybe with some other like big name magical treatises, like the important things, maybe not
the important thing.
Yes. Right. Have a great week, everyone, and we'll see you in the next Inner Sanctum. School of Occult Arts, the new semester is beginning, so any incoming students will start in year 1. Please come and join us. We're doing a lot of great group workings together. We are doing a lot of really cool classes, as well as a video library with over 65 different lectures at this point. And that doesn't count like group activities, group meetups, group conversations. That's going to be really exciting. The time to join is now. That's on the schoolofoccultarts.com, or the eckharts.com has a link to the schoolofoccultarts.com as well.
That's true.
And we still have 2 spaces left for Numinous. So if you're interested, these are the last 2 spaces. They are, they're going to be, well, they're amazing. They're going to be in luxury rooms. It's going to be a group of magical practitioners getting together to do all sorts of ceremonial work, all sorts of magical praxis theory conversations, luxurious dinners and spa days. We're doing it all. It's going to be a blast. So if you want one of those spots, grab them at our website, theeckharts.com, and we will see you in the future.